half of what you see, none of what you hear, even if it's spat by me, your man Louie T. It's Lyin season. Deonte Banks, cornerback, Maryland. So often Washington has had guys right in their backyard, i.e. Stephon Diggs, and they've passed up an opportunity to keep them close by, and they've essentially made them pay, end up being really good pros. I don't think they're going to allow that to happen this time around. Fits their scheme a little bit more so than the next team up on the clock. And this is a no-brainer. The Steelers were chomping at the bit to get this opportunity to bring a legacy pick home, and fits a need, fits their style of play. They were hoping that he would fall to them, and he did. And so they're not wasting any time. With the 17th overall pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, the Pittsburgh Steelers select Joey Porter Jr., cornerback, Penn State. So now you get to the 18th selection, and it's the Lions on the clock for the second time in this draft. They selected Devon Witherspoon with their first pick, cornerback out of Illinois, 6th overall. Now back on the clock at 18. They've handled a defensive issue. Now they're looking to upgrade an offensive position. You know, this is a football team, could easily use some help on the offensive line. But this is a football team that, skill position-wise, really solid. The news of Jameson Williams is very disappointing, but it doesn't prompt you to do anything foolish. You know, you don't have to have a knee-jerk reaction to that and now all of a sudden draft a receiver. He's only suspended for 6 games, not gone for the entire season. And even if he were, you still wouldn't necessarily need to do anything rash. At some point, they will draft a receiver, though, because Quintez Cephas, who I don't know was going to make the roster anyway, got caught up in that whole situation, and they released him anyway. And so you're probably going to need some depth at receiver and some more competition anyway. But that's not what you're looking to do here, okay? Receiver's fine. You can get by with what you have at receiver, and you'll add a guy eventually. Running back's good because you handled that in free agency. You lost Jamal Williams, but you went out, and I think you actually upgraded the position. If David Montgomery's healthy, he's a better running back overall than Jamal Williams, even though Williams provided you with leadership and toughness and a nose for the end zone. But I think you're getting all of those things with David Montgomery, again, assuming health, which is something you can't always count on with him. But still got DeAndre Swift, your running back position. You might can get a guy later on in the draft, but you don't need to do it now, right? Tight end, though, it's a problem. You traded away T.J. Hawkinson last year. Rightfully so. It was time to move on. You weren't going to pay him. So, you know, let him go. Pick up some more draft capital. You did that. And it's cool what you had at tight end last year, but I just think about that Jets game with that play action fake that you threw to the tight end. You snuck him across the formation. Goff did a great job of selling it, and he's wide open. And I think it took him 37 seconds to get to the end zone. And I'm thinking, this play worked to perfection, and this tight end is struggling to get to the end zone. And that's the best you got. Now, I think he was your second string tight end or something. I don't know. You don't have anything at tight end, really, to be excited about. Let's change that, okay? You're not getting the best pass-catching tight end. You're not getting the best run-blocking tight end. But what you are getting is the best combination of both. So with the 18th overall pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Dan Campbell, being a former tight end, gets excited about guys like this. And this particular tight end here in Michael Mayer out of Notre Dame, he reminds Dan Campbell so much of one of Campbell's best teammates, Jason Witten. And I think he's going to jump at the opportunity to select Michael Mayer, tight end, out of Notre Dame. So you go to number 19. It's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and they've had an eventful offseason. Tom Brady retired. They brought in Baker Mayfield. They got rid of Donovan Smith as their left tackle. So I wonder if Tristan Wirfs is going to make the journey over from right tackle to left tackle. We'll see. They lost some guys in the secondary. Sean Murphy-Bunting is now in Tennessee. So they're going through a bit of a transitional period, are the Buccaneers. It's 2 years ago they were the Super Bowl champions, and now they're kind of trying to put the pieces of the puzzle back together. So there was talk about them potentially being interested in a quarterback. I think they're going to give Baker Mayfield a realistic shot at, getting the job done in Tampa. If that is in fact the case, and they still have Kyle Trask, and reportedly Trask is going to get an opportunity to compete. We'll see what happens. At the end of the day, whomever is under center, he's going to need to be protected. You moved on from Donovan Smith, which means you have a hole on your offensive line. How you go about filling that is up to you, whether you move Wirfs from right to left, you leave him at right because he's dominant there, and you go out and get you a left tackle in the draft. Whatever the case may be, you're drafting a tackle, okay? It doesn't really matter, right, left, up, down, you're getting a tackle. And so really hasn't been touched because these tackles aren't that dominant. They're good, but they're not elite. But only 2 offensive linemen have come off the board to this point. But that's about to change. So you better get yours now while they're still there, while supplies last. And that's exactly what the Tampa Bay Buccaneers plan to do here. 19th overall pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers select. So now we get to the 20th pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, and the Seattle Seahawks are on the clock for the second time. There's one thing that the Seahawks love to do more than anything else: trade out of the first round. Now, they've already made a selection, and they were really looking at an opportunity to get a quarterback. Didn't get him with 5th overall pick, selected Jalen Carter, defensive lineman out of Georgia. Thought they were going to have a shot at Hendon Hooker at 20. He's long gone. So now they're kind of sitting here and saying, 20's cool, but you know what we like to do. We like to get as many darts as we can to throw at the dartboard, and just don't feel like 20 has a ton of value. But the phone rang. John Schneider picked it up, and guess who was on the other line? None other than the Super Bowl defending Kansas City Chiefs. And Schneider wants to know what's really good. Brett Veach, the GM of the Chiefs, was really good. He's like, man, we had a kid in for a workout. He was so good on tape, and we were so smitten by this kid that we had Patrick Mahomes drop everything he was doing and work this kid out personally. And we were blown away. We love us some wide receivers with talent. All right. We just had one of our young speedsters leave for the Jets. Right. So we need to replace him. All right. Juju Smith-Schuster just left for the Patriots. So we need a receiver. Even though we got a bunch of stuff, we just took a guy last year in the 2nd round, and Sky Moore that we love. But you can never have enough, right? And John Snyder's like, right. And guess what? The Chargers love this kid, Zay Flowers, out of Boston College. But guess what? We love him more. And we're going to prove it. Let me get number 20 up off you, Seattle. Seahawks is like, bet. I love moving back anyway. It's my favorite thing to do. Incoming! Nothing like some good old family business taking place in the NFL Draft. Gotta block your fellow family member from upgrading their team with the player that you like as well. And so the Chiefs come up to 20, block the Los Angeles Chargers from getting their guy, and with the 20th overall selection in the 2023 NFL Draft, the Kansas City Chiefs select Zay Flowers, wide receiver, Boston College. And so you go to the Chargers, and they're a little disappointed after what just transpired, right? They thought they had themselves a golden opportunity to upgrade the receiver position. The one thing they're lacking at that position is speed. It's been a problem. They had Jalen Guyton. He gets injured. That was the 1 ounce of speed they had. They did add DeAndre Carter. He's cool, but you know, right? They need to upgrade the position. They need to make life easier for Justin Herbert. They need to upgrade the wide receiver position and more specifically speed at the wide receiver position. They wanted Zay Flowers. And, you know, this is one of those easy layups. Daniel Jeremiah grew up in San Diego, is a San Diego Padres fan, loves the Chargers. He does their preseason games. He has intimate knowledge on the Los Angeles Chargers. So when he says they loved Zay Flowers and they're going to take him in his mock draft, pretty sure the Chiefs got wind of that. Anyway, Chargers and Tom Telesco aren't really about trading up. They did it last year, which knocked my socks off because usually Coupon Tom likes to stay in his lane. He gets 7 picks. He's making 7 selections right where he sits. So last year was a little bit of a change for him. But it's back to being the Tom Telesco that Chargers fans have come to know and hate. And so he'll sit back, allow the Chiefs to snatch up their guy. No fret, you're still going to get a fast receiver, one of the faster ones in this draft. And we saw what he could do when he's healthy and when he's playing at a high level. And so they're hoping he can add a little bit of that to this lineup. With the 21st pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, the Los Angeles Chargers select Jalen Hyatt, wide receiver, Tennessee. So the 22nd pick belongs to the Baltimore Ravens, and they've had a tumultuous offseason. It started by giving essentially a $100 million deal to linebacker Roquan Smith, who they traded for during the season right before the trade deadline. And the Lamar Jackson situation arose where he is still, squabbling over a contract. Ravens had to slap him with the non-exclusive franchise tag, trying to see if anyone would put a deal on the table that would entice them to match. It did not happen. So they've been going back and forth in the media with their star quarterback. That's a mess. Then there were conversations about would the Ravens trade up in this year's draft class to get a guy to replace Lamar Jackson? Could they combo a package together, to facilitate a trade with Lamar and get their guy in this year's draft class and move on and wash their hands altogether with the situation? None of that transpired. Lamar Jackson is going to play for the Baltimore Ravens at least this season. They already signed Odell Beckham Jr. Shame on you if you step to the old dirty Beckham. So ODB is now a Raven, and we'll see if they decide to add another receiver in this year's draft. They won't do it here at 22. They've moved on from some of their corners. Marcus Peters is no longer in Baltimore. They've got a glaring hole at the cornerback position. And there's a guy that really fits, to me, a Baltimore Raven. And he's sitting right there. And I told you there's certain teams in this league, you look at a player and you say, that's a Baltimore Raven, or that's a Pittsburgh Steeler, right? This guy is a Baltimore Raven. I look at him and I say, you look like a Raven. With the 22nd pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, the Baltimore Ravens select cornerback Cam Smith, South Carolina. So now we go to the 23rd pick. This was formerly the pick of the Minnesota Vikings. They traded all the way up to 10 to select quarterback Hendon Hooker out of Tennessee. And so now the Eagles are on the clock for the first time of 2 picks in the first round. And they'll have another first round pick next year again. So they'll double up, as Howie Roseman likes to do. Just keeping, his clip full at all times. And thus, the Eagles are in a great spot. They got offensive firepower. They really don't need anything. They want some stuff. They'd like to upgrade a couple of positions, but they don't truly need anything. That's a great place to be in. But the only way you stay there is if you're forward thinking. You keep thinking there's nothing that we need, and then you don't start drafting guys to be ready to take on some of these spots that are going to become needs in the future, then you're going to find yourself needing some things here shortly. So one of those positions, in this position that they're about to take, this is strictly a, we don't really have any glaring needs. This is the best player on probably everybody's board at this point in the draft. I don't know who's going to finally ante up and take him. He's still sitting here. Why the hell not? Why not? Right? Right. With the 23rd pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, the Philadelphia Eagles select Bijan Robinson, running back, Texas. Oy vey. Go to the 24th pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, and it belongs to the Jacksonville Jaguars. What a hell of a season they put together. After starting off slow and sluggish, they dug themselves out of a massive hole to ultimately come back, rally, and win the AFC South, host a playoff game. Talking about rallying and coming from the depths of despair to end up securing victory, they did exactly that in the playoff game against the Los Angeles Chargers. What were they down in that game? 24 or 27 to nothing. Either way, they got blitzed early in that game, hung in, came back, and ultimately stole that game from the Chargers, who had an epic meltdown, which is what we've come to know and love from the Chargers. And so they even won a playoff game, went on the road, and had the Chiefs on the ropes. And if not for a late fumble in that ball game, they might have gone to Casey and stolen that game with a compromised Patrick Mahomes. Nonetheless, they feel like they're building something in Jacksonville. And one of the positions that they need to continue building at, because for as dynamic as that offense can be at times, they also can give it up. Part of the reason they're giving it up, they're not necessarily all that great in the secondary. And they love what they're getting out of Tyson Campbell, but he doesn't really have a running mate. They got some solid play last year out of the corner from the Rams, who I actually really like, but they can do better than that. They can upgrade that position, and that's what I think they ultimately look to do here with the 24th pick in the 2023 NFL Draft. The Jacksonville Jaguars select Kelee Ringo, cornerback, Georgia. It worked before. Why can't it work again? It was so nice. They're trying the Georgia cornerback thing twice. So we go to the 25th pick in the draft, and this belongs to the New York Giants. Last year was an overachievement, and that's an understatement for the G-men. You overhaul your entire organization, pretty much top to bottom, with owner being the only thing that didn't change. New GM, new head coach, new everything, it felt like. Bring in a bunch of new players, which is what you expect when you get a new general manager. You turn over the roster, out with the old, in with the new. They didn't pick up the fifth-year option on Daniel Jones, and rightfully so. Saquon Barkley looked like he was playing his last year in New York, and then they were going to flush that position and start over. And it seemed like last year was going to be a rebuilding year of sorts. Well, their head coach had other ideas, and so did the players. And ultimately, the Giants got off to a great start with Brian Daboll. And before you knew it, they were 6-2, playing exceptional football. Ultimately, go to the playoffs, win on the road in Minnesota in Wild Card Weekend, get blitzed by the Eagles in the divisional round. But just making it to the playoffs would have been one thing. They not only made it to the playoffs in what was perceived to be a rebuilding year, they won a playoff game. Daniel Jones gets a massive deal in the offseason. Saquon Barkley gets slapped with the franchise tag. And so the building begins in New York. They went out and got a bunch of receivers. They cut ties with, one of their failed free agency pickups at the receiver position. And so they're building that thing up in New York. Went out and signed a really good linebacker in Bobby Okereke. Traded for traded for Darren Waller from the Raiders. They've made some really good moves, but the first objective is to protect your quarterback. If you're going to invest the type of money that the Giants just invested in Daniel Jones, you probably should protect him. And one of the most important positions is the pivot position, which they don't actually have a center right now. That's about to change. No center has been taken in this year's draft class, so they get to take who they perceive to be the best center in this year's draft class. There's no perception he is the best center in this year's draft class, and they're going to take him here at number 25 overall in the 2023 NFL Draft. The New York Giants select John Michael Schmitz, offensive lineman, Minnesota. So with the 26th pick, the Dallas Cowboys are now on the clock, and Cowboys are always interesting. One thing I can say about the Cowboys, and I say this all the time, they draft really well. You say what you want about Dallas, say what you want about Jerry Jones and company. They draft really well. They get talented football players, irregardless of off-the-field issues or things that you may not love about this guy. They don't mind. They'll take a Randy Gregory, okay, when nobody else is really considering him. You know, that's their move. They get talent however they can acquire it. So now they're in a position where they win 12 games last year, threatened the Eagles to win the division, but they go win their first playoff game in ages, it feels like, and smoke Tampa Bay. They should have beat the 49ers the following week and made it to the NFC Championship game, but they couldn't get it done. Dak Prescott had an awful game. And so they're looking around and saying, if Dak's healthy, they traded for a corner in Stephon Gilmore. They traded for a receiver in Brandon Cooks. So they feel like they've upgraded two of the biggest needs, which was a number 2 corner and a number 2 receiver. Now you're playing with house money, so to speak. And there's several things the Cowboys could do. They moved on from Ezekiel Elliott. Their best running back remaining on the roster is coming off of an ankle injury, a nasty injury. And so they could easily go running back here. But Bijan Robinson is gone. And so I think that takes that off the table. And I don't think they were going to do that anyway. It would have been nice to have that as an option if you're Dallas. But I'm looking at Dan Quinn, and nothing gets Dan Quinn more excited. His blood rushes from his first head to his other head, pause, when he sees players like this. There's nothing like an undersized, fast defender to get Dan Quinn up out of his seat and excited. And he's got a boner right now. And he's ready to explode. Pause again. Double pause. You saw this guy for the first time and he almost lost it. Put it back in your pants, Dan. The 26th pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, the Dallas Cowboys select Collegiate Kancey, defensive lineman, Pitt. So now you get to the 27th pick. It's the Buffalo Bills. And last season was so disappointing. Even though they made it to the playoffs, they made it to the divisional round, it felt like a disappointment. It felt like that season had so much more to give. Started out like gangbusters, and the Bills looked like the best team in football. They destroyed the Rams. We didn't know at the time the Rams were going to be sorry. Go into L.A. on banner night and destroy them. Get off to this rousing start, even though there was a loss in there that could have been avoided to the Jets, you know, or matter of fact, it was to the Dolphins. But they still looked so dynamic offensively. And then there was this malaise, and there was this part of the season where they offensively looked like they missed Brian Daboll. And Josh Allen started turning the ball over, and he had all these red zone turnovers, something that he had avoided pretty much his entire career. And, you know, all of a sudden the defense wasn't as dominant. They had some injuries, obviously. Von Miller goes down. You lose your safeties. Both of them at one point weren't in the lineup. And so they were going through it defensively. So obviously they get the playoff win against Miami, but they did it against a third-string quarterback and barely got it done. Then they get blitzed the following week at home by the Cincinnati Bengals, and it just felt like an abrupt end to a season that had so much promise. So now they're going to try it again in 2023, and I think they feel like offensively they're good. They're going to add a receiver, and they could do that here, and that's definitely in play. I think that's the consensus, is that they're going to add a receiver here at 27. I don't think that's the case. They can do that later on in the draft. They don't have to do it now. And they drafted a guy last year in Khalil Shakir that I think they like. Like, they don't have to do that here at 27. They can do that a little bit later in the draft and still feel good about the player that they're getting. I think what's more important here is either linebacker, because you lost a big piece of your defense in free agency this year. Can't keep everybody, right? You could take a linebacker here, and no linebacker has been taken, so you got the cream of the crop. You like Sanders. You like Jack Campbell. You like Toa. All of those guys are available. Don't think you have to do that here either, though. All right? I think what's more important is the back end, because if Von Miller's healthy, with all the resources you've spent up front on the defensive line, you'd like to think that you can get enough pressure. But that back end needs to be shored up. You had, the DeMar Hamlin situation. I don't want to leave that out. That was a big part of your season last year. And so he was a big part of your secondary before he got, had the situation happen. He's back now, which is a blessing, and able to, get back to football activities. But your safeties are getting old. And you just read up with Micah Hyde, or I believe it was Jordan Poyer, actually. But that's essentially a one-year deal. You can get out of it after 1 year. You need help in the secondary. Not on the outside, but on the inside. I got just the guy for you here at number 27. With the 27th pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, the Buffalo Bills select Brian Branch, defensive back, Alabama. So we get to the 28th pick, and it's the Cincinnati Bengals, a team that defeated the Buffalo Bills in the playoffs, made it to the AFC Championship game, and lost in epic fashion to the Kansas City Chiefs. This is a team on the rise, and I don't know if it's sustainable. Don't know if they're going to continue to be able to do some of the things we've seen the last 2 years, make it to the Super Bowl, make it to the AFC Championship game, but they seem like they're a team that's going to be around for quite some time. And if they are going to remain there, they have to keep their quarterback upright. Don't know what's going to happen with Joe Mixon, his situation. They may move on from him. They already lost their backup running back, Samaje Perine, in free agency. He's now in Denver. And so they're going to do something at running back in this draft at some point. But you don't have to do that here, right? Bijan Robinson's not available. And so that's not something that I think you would have done anyway. But it would have been nice to have that option, right? But he's gone. So what you really need to do is to make sure that Joe Burrow stays upright. And you've been doing all that you can over the last 2 years in particular to make that a real thing, right? To have that come to fruition, to protect your franchise quarterback. It hasn't always gone well. Some of the guys that you've spent picks on, like Jonah Williams, for instance, hasn't panned out. He wants to trade now because you went out and you got a guy in free agency, or you traded for a tackle, or not traded for, you signed a guy in free agency from the Chiefs and Orlando Brown. And so you're still trying to figure some things out on that offensive line. Well, let's continue with that theme. Got a left tackle now. How about you get the right tackle? Got a guy here that I think fits that bill for you, takes care of that, and fortifies your offensive line and gives you bookend tackles to protect your investment. The 28th pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, the Cincinnati Bengals select So now the New Orleans Saints are on the clock at 29, and they had quite the offseason, moving on from the Red Rifle, Andy Dalton, and acquiring Derek Carr in free agency, inking him to a massive deal, which should solidify your quarterback position. Alvin Kamara probably going to be suspended this year. We'll see what happens. Michael Thomas restructured his deal, which is a good thing. Hasn't played football. He looks to be in great shape. Saw him squatting, a whole small house the other day. Great. Now let's see you actually play in more than 2 football games in a season, and I'll be impressed. But even with that, you had some guys show up last year. Had the undrafted kid at the receiver position who is a returner and emerges as a deep threat. I love the tight end that you got out of Oregon who was a receiver, and Jawan Johnson. He looks like a player. Chris Olave was a stud last year. He was your best receiver last year. So you've got some stuff to work with. And if Michael Thomas comes back, there's some stuff here. At some point, maybe you could take a tight end. At some point, maybe you could take a running back. However, if you're going to sign Derek Carr, the first thing you have to do is protect Derek Carr. Because an unprotected Derek Carr is an infected Derek Carr. Did you see what I just did there? Anyway, Saints have usually been pretty good about keeping the interior of their offensive line intact. When they had Drew Brees, it was never a question. Kind of caught you slipping here lately because Drew Brees is no longer there. Let's go ahead and take care of this. Because if you're going to have Derek Carr, you're going to have to make sure Derek Carr stays upright. Because Derek ain't running anywhere. With the 29th pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, the New Orleans Saints select O'Cyrus Torrence, offensive lineman, Florida. So now we get to the 30th selection, which is probably the worst pick in the NFL draft every year. Not the 30th pick, but the penultimate pick. The second to last pick, which means you lost the Super Bowl. That's at 30 this year because there's no 32nd pick because the Dolphins were docked a first-round pick due to the penalty they incurred for the tampering they did with Tom Brady. So there's only 31 first-round picks this year. So the Eagles at 30 is the penultimate pick of the first round. They've already made a selection. They traded back Howie Roseman. He did it again. Howie's dirty ass. Traded back from 10 to 23. Picked up another first-round pick next year. So they're just doing this shit again. Keeps the ammo in the clip. Keeps the clip in the gun. And he's always got one in the chamber. So at 30, we talked about this. They really don't need anything. But if you look at their defensive line, they had a massive loss. All right. Javon Hargraves is now in San Francisco with the 49ers. They did re-sign Fletcher Cox, 80 years old. They did re-sign Brandon Graham, 77 years old. Both of them are on one-year deals, essentially. And so you probably need to add a defensive lineman. And one thing the Eagles have always done is they've always worked from inside out on both sides of the football. Always making sure that the trenches are taken care of, defensively and offensively. Don't think that's going to change here. And so they've got a guy with some extreme versatility sitting here at 30. And again, why not if you're the Eagles? With the 30th pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, the Philadelphia Eagles select Lucas Van Ness, defensive lineman, Iowa. So you get to the final pick of the first round, 31st overall. And this belongs to the Seattle Seahawks. It belonged to the Kansas City Chiefs, the Super Bowl defending champion, Kansas City Chiefs. Well, that was until the Chiefs identified Zay Flowers as a guy that they just had to have. And no one loves to trade back more in the first round, sometimes out of the round altogether, than the Seattle Seahawks. So they were more than welcome to trading back. So they're on the clock now at 31, and they've already taken one guy on the defensive line, and they're looking around their defensive line, and they said, Uchenna Nwosu was pretty good last year, but we can do better. They got some studs in that secondary. We saw what they were able to do last year at the cornerback position in particular, with some young players. Linebacker has always been a position that they've invested in. They got a former first rounder in Jordan Brooks, who took over last year. They got another guy this year that they went out in free agency that they're thinking maybe they can resurrect his career in Devin Bush. So they're not really looking to do anything. And, oh, by the way, they brought Bobby Wagner back to Seattle as well. So the linebacker position's fine. But up front is where the problem is. They got some stuff. I like Darrell Taylor. I like him. I don't love him. I like Uchenna Nwosu. I don't love him. I love the Jalen Carter pick. And I think I like this one too. I don't know if I love it. I love the value you're getting here. But you can never have enough edge rushers. Never. Never. And so Seattle realizes that. They know they need to get better up front. They know they need to get after the quarterback better. And thus, with the 31st pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, the Seattle Seahawks select So let's recap the draft. As you can see, 3 trades happened in this draft. Cardinals traded from 3 to 4. Indy came up, got their quarterback. Vikings traded from 23 to 10. Got their quarterback in Hendon Hooker. And the Chiefs came from 31 up to 20 to select wide receiver Zay Flowers. Those are all the selections. So that's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on my 2023 NFL Mock Draft.
Believe half of what you see, none of what you hear, even if it's spat by me, your man Louie T. It's Lyin season.
LouieTeeNetwork.